One of the biggest things in our current day and age, which is, I think, is a common problem with any generation, we need to manage our mind along with the changes. In previous generations, and I'm not doing a generational thing where previous generations were better than this generation. There is something we did differently, though, that we're doing differently now. And on the positive side, we are much more aware of mental health. Our technological advances in medicine are fantastic, and we're talking more about that is fantastic. But what we are not doing now that we used to do is we are now, as soon as someone feels uncomfortable, it's being labeled and diagnosed by a medical model, reductionism, and people are trying to eliminate symptoms. Whereas in the past, it was description. So we need to describe, not diagnose. That's different about this generation. And what the research shows, mine plus others, is that if you just let symptoms happen and then, see your issues as symptoms that need to be suppressed. So see anxiety, depression, you're going to get worse. That's what the research shows.
Hi, I'm Kelly Namiro. Welcome to the Balancing Chaos podcast, a lifestyle podcast where we'll talk about wellness, motherhood, and some really exciting things in between. My goal is to help you develop a lifestyle that promotes health, wholeness, and success. Through my conversations with our experts and guests, I hope to inspire you to live a beautiful, full, and joyful life as you navigate balancing the chaos. Hello again to all of my favorite listeners. Welcome to another enlightening episode of the Balancing Chaos podcast. I am here today with a truly extraordinary guest who's here to delve into the incredible world of neuroscience, mental health, and the power of the mind. Our guest is a cognitive neuroscientist, communication pathologist, and renowned author, Dr. Caroline Leaf. With a career spanning several decades, Dr. Leaf has dedicated herself to unraveling the mysteries of the mind-brain connection and how it influences our mental and well-being. From pioneering research in neuroplasticity to developing groundbreaking theories like geodesic information processing theory, Dr. Leaf's work has touched countless lives and helped individuals overcome their challenges, transform their thinking, and pursue their purpose in life. She is the author of best-selling books, Switch on Your Brain, Think, Learn, Succeed, and Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess, and her teachings have resonated with audiences worldwide. In this episode, we have the privilege of delving in deep to the science of thought, mind management, and practical strategies for improving brain performance and mental health, which you guys know for me are such important things when it comes to building the foundation for your health. So Dr. Leaf, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. We're so excited to have you.
Oh, thank you. It's lovely to be with you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
So your journey in the field of cognitive neuroscience and communication pathology is really remarkable. And I think that it's, like I said, it's truly the foundation for all other forms of health. If we don't have our mental health, then we can't make good choices anywhere else. And so can you talk to us a little bit about how did this kind of spark your interest, and how did you know that this was the field that you wanted to go into?
It's a great question. And, thank you for not many people get what you've just said, which is that without mind, everything else just pretty much is by the by, so we can spend a lot of time on our physical health and our diet and all these optimization things, but if we don't manage our mind, which drives all of those, we pretty much playing games. We're just not going to have a sustainable change in our lives because our mind drives everything. So the mind-brain-body connection has always been a fascination with me. So my field of study is called psychoneurobiology. So mind, neuro, brain, biology, body. So it's the whole connection.
Oh, I love that.
Which is really interesting. And so the research, I still currently do research, and we publish in scientific journals. I have a whole team. We've got a big study running at the moment. And what we look at is basically how what I've looked at over the years and what we currently still look at is how does, for example, this conversation become part of your brain network through neuroplasticity, and also part of your body, and also part of your mind. And what is the difference between the mind, brain, and body, and what are thoughts, and how do they form, and what are memories, and all these emotions and all these words that people just throw around and kind of understand. I wanted to understand intensely what the science behind that is and how it works, and that grabbed my interest honestly very, very early on. I got into medicine and was going into neurosurgery and that kind of thing. And I thought, well, I don't want to just get stuck cutting up brains. I wanted to understand the mind. I didn't want to get stuck in a biomedical model. So I changed fields and got into what I've got into now. And it's been an onward journey. I mean, I love it. It's 40 years almost that I've been in the field. I've practiced for 25. And I'm still going strong and still love it, because it's who we are. It helps understand who we are as humans and how we function.
The fact that you've been doing it for that long, it's just like speaks such volumes to how much you're like passionate about it and you really enjoy what you're doing. And I can even see it on your face. Like you really are like, so just, I feel like the topic itself is very, there's so many different possibilities and answers out there. You could be, in this field for like you have been forever and like still not know everything, because there's so much to be able to learn and discover and understand about the human mind. Because I mean, that's what we all are, here to figure out a little bit more.
It is true. I mean, every podcast, every book, we all just try to understand how we function as humans. And, the last 40 years has been a very interesting time, because as we started learning about how the brain works more, and with technology, we could see inside the brain. When I started research, we only had CT scans and EEGs, and even then our understanding was quite limited. And they actually thought back in the 80s that the brain couldn't change. But by the mid-90s, it was understood that the brain could change. And I did some of that early pioneering research in the field. And even so, but on the other hand, that's been almost like a negative thing, because as we've wonderfully advanced in our knowledge of the brain, we've become a bit reductionistic in that everything's about the physical brain. And that has been at a sacrifice, and the sacrifice has been the human mind. And so there's the study of the mind. It still has gone on, but the dominant kind of thinking out there for the average sort of lay person and the media, and the sort of dominant zeitgeist that comes through, is that the mind and the brain are the same thing, and that your brain makes you do things, but your brain doesn't make you do things. It's your mind. So thank you for saying that. Your mind is your priority. It's your fundamental. With messy mind, messy brain, messy body, messy life, bottom line. So unless we mind.
So there's so much that you've said that I want to unpack, but I want to go back to one of the first things that you said when you were talking about why you chose this field, which was around like trying to understand how like thoughts and emotions, right, impact the physical body, and that like mind body connection almost. And I think that a lot of people, including like my own clients who like I talk to, they'll be like, oh, like my stress and my emotions and like me feeling overwhelmed, that's not affecting my physical body. That's not affecting like my symptoms. Can you talk a little bit more about that and tell people how like emotions, from my understanding, are actually like little chemical messengers? And so I would love to hear more thoughtful way of explaining it.
Oh, you've actually explained it really well there. I've got in my books, I talk a lot about this. And then I also just published I've got 5 publications under review, but we've just released, and one's just been published, and I can send it to you, the link. And it's hard to read, but there's a summary. And in that, I explain how when your mind, how it changes your brain, and how it also changes your body. So a lot of the research we do, we'll look at, people will come into wherever we run our study, and then we'll look at the whole psychological side. And the most important thing of the psychological side is, what's your story? What's going on in your life? And tell us your story. And then we'll also do various different psychological scales. I've developed one, for example, that looks at self-regulation. And so there's that component. Then we'll look in the brain, and we'll use QEEG, which is a type of way of looking at how the brain is responding millions of times literally in a second, in response to on an energy level. So like if you're dead, your brain does nothing. But because we're alive, these words are going into our brains, and what you're hearing and seeing, and that generates an energy response in the brain. You get all these waves of energy, like waves of the sea, and then that activates chemicals and activates genes, and all kinds of things start happening in the brain, and it's really fast. So we look at that response, and then we also look at what's going on in the body, and we look at it in different ways. Like, for example, which is really interesting, we look at the DNA, specifically looking at chromosomes, which are like little, as you'd know, little X-shaped chromosomes, and the ends of chromosomes, there are things called telomeres. And telomeres are very important when it comes to our health, our physical and mental health. Direct relationship. They have a direct relationship to how our cells are multiplying, and our cells are multiplying all the time.
Like, and it has to do with aging, right? Is that right? Is that correct?
Aging, a lot to do with just physical health. So, like, for example, in this conversation, in life, every day, every second, we are making 800,000 to 1 million new cells. And that process, so in other words, our body is remaking itself all the time. And the quality of our body is dependent on the quality of our mind, because our mind is what's making the cells make themselves. So the mind drives that process. So if our mind's messy, we're making messy cells. The cells make our organs, make our systems, make our body and our brain. And over time, that then is either increasing your vulnerability to disease or decreasing, depending on how you're managing your mind. So the key factors, so we look at telomeres as one of the ways we look at that. And telomeres are the ends of chromosomes. If you imagine my nails are telomeres, and as every cell, that time a cell divides, they get shorter and then they replenish through an enzyme, and there's a whole biochemical process. And as we age, they get weaker and weaker. And it's a slow process, but you don't have to, you can slow down that process. So you don't have, that was the longevity aspect. So we know from a lot of work on exercise and certain diets that you can slow down the rate at which telomeres weaken. But we've also found, and this has been a big part of the research I've done, very new kind of research, is that your mind plays a bigger role than exercise and diet when it comes to telomeres, because your mind is actually completely driving the health of those telomeres. So you can have a really healthy diet, exercise routine, but if you're not managing your mind and you just like suppressing issues, staying irritated, staying on social media, just accepting sort of negative things, and I mean that's a wrong way, but there's just like accepting patterns in your life that you think, oh well, that's just who I am, I can't change, and not developing and kindness and gratitude and resilience. Your telomeres are getting bombarded with the wrong kind of energy, so they get weaker and weaker and weaker. And so what we've seen, for example, in our studies, in over 63-day period, which is the time it takes to change the mind-brain-body network. It's a whole network of proteins and chemicals and energy, and every experience becomes a network in that sense, chemicals, proteins, energies. And so this conversation is becoming one of these networks. And the more you think about something, the more it grows. And so a habit is when we've grown a network and made it solid. And that takes about 63 days, not 21. It takes about 63, which means
I'm glad you busted that myth, because everyone says 21. So
totally a myth, not at all scientific. So I've done years of research in this. We've got a massive study running at the moment looking at the time frames and what happens at each point, like 14 days, 21 days, all that kind of thing. But the essential thing is that those networks do not change over short periods. They change in cycles of 63, which is about 9 weeks in that region, around about 9 weeks. And for that change to take place, over that time, it's changing not just the energy fields of your mind, but also it's changing the networks of your brain. It's changing chemicals. It's changing your body cells. It's changing the health of the telomeres. So we see, like,
incredible.
It is incredible. So we've had people, for example, coming into our studies. At the beginning of the study, they are totally depressed, some even suicidal, like just the weight of life, overwhelmed, burnt out, all different levels. And we've had some people like in their mid-30s. When you look at the telomeres, you can tell the age of the biology. So if you are, let's say, 35, and that's your chronological age, you want your biological age to be also 35 or younger.
Younger, right?
Yeah. So now what we've seen is some people coming into the clinic when their mind's not managed, their biological age is sometimes up to 30 years older than.
Wow.
The one classic case, and I've actually got it in one of my books where I show the slides and everything, of one of our subjects who was in their mid-30s, but their body was of a 65-year-old sickly person. Within 9 weeks of learning how to manage their mind, they gained up to 30 years of biological health. So by the end of 9
weeks, you
weeks,
can really actually reverse it. Like if you focus on managing your mind.
That's it. That's how important the body is.
Right.
Not the body, the mind-brain-body connection is. When you use your mind, you're changing your telomeres, you're changing the energy that drives every cell, that drives every chemical, that drives every hormone. You are influencing that and changing how that's functioning.
I literally I've been telling clients this for years now, that like you can do all the right things with your diet. Like you just said, like you can do all the right things with your exercise. You can take all your supplements. But until you learn, and I say stress, but you're saying like your mind, because I think that encompasses it more. Until you learn to manage stress, like you are still going to feel burnt out, overwhelmed, like you're losing your hair, like you can't lose weight, all of those things. And that was a beautiful way of explaining it. And so when you see that, like people like the one you just described coming into, your clinic or whatever, what does it look like when their mind isn't right? And like, what are like the main reasons you see for this up until like, they come and see you and try to get the right structures and strategies into place to shift things around over the course of 9 weeks? Is it we're working too much? Is it we're on social media too much? Is it like, what are the reasons or like the big themes that you're seeing?
So first of all, I don't practice anymore, but so we still run clinical trials. So
Right.
but because of the work we do, we get people, we get tons of contact from thousands of people contacting us all the time with problems, and then we whatever. So from my years of practicing, and then from my clinical trials, and from working with people indirectly. So what we see that it's different for everyone, but there's obviously every generation has different demands, and this we're in a generation of high technology and AI and everything, which are good things. They're not bad things. The problem is that we're not being trained, and we're not training our children sufficiently. And not everyone, I'm saying we in the general sense, there's always exceptions, training ourselves and our children how to manage things. So every generation goes through challenges. Not that this generation's had worse challenges than others. There's been wars and plagues, and TV was invented. People were worried about things like we're worrying about now. So it's not the technology, it's not those things that we should be worrying about. Is what we're doing with our mind. So when you said that you tell your clients, stress is what's worrying you, that's your mind working for you to be able to say, hey guys, your stress is what's really impacting how you function. Those vitamins and things, your stress even influences how your body absorbs the vitamin. I mean,
Right.
it gets to that point. And that is your mind. You use your mind to share that information. They receive that information with their mind. And stress is basically, as we know, stress is actually good for us. It's unmanaged stress that's the issue. So it's a chronic unmanaged stress. That is and what is chronic unmanaged stress? It's with our mind, we're not dealing with the issues that are making us feel stressed out. So we suppressing stuff, or we're using work as an addiction, or we're using whatever to hide behind, instead of dealing with our stuff, not taking the time to process, spending too much time on social media. Social media is not bad. I'll stress it again. What is bad is if you're not managing it. So if you're sitting there scrolling through social media and it's making you feel envy and jealousy, and you getting totally caught up days and days later and thinking, well, I've got to look like that person, or I've got to wish I had that. If you don't manage that, then that's going to catch you, and your telomeres will shorten, your cortisol levels, your hormones, so your body will suffer, your brain will wire in toxicity. So you'll have all these toxic protein structures in your brain, and your mind goes like kind of crazy, like a tsunami wave. And that combination over time increases your vulnerability to disease by 35 to 98%. So
Wow.
it's how we manage our mind means that, okay, I'm looking at all the social media that's making me feel jealous or envious. Jealousy and envy are not bad. They're information. There's no bad emotion. Emotions are they basically healthy. Emotions are information. That's all
Yeah.
we should see. Information. And
If we're looking at it from like a perspective that is curious rather than judgmental, right?
Exactly. So if you see emotions, like maybe this side, there's all the what we would call good, and those would be bad, but they're not bad and good. They're actually just different types of emotions. These are, we would classify maybe as more the negative ones and those more the positive ones, but both are needed for us to function. And if you look at them from a perspective of information versus judgment, then that jealousy and envy, instead of you think sort of like trying to suppress it or grow it, which will just collapse you rather say, be curious. Why am I feeling envy and jealousy? What need is not being met in me that I feel this need that I'm feeling this reaction of envy and jealousy? Where am I feeling it in my body? How's it shifting my perspective? How's it influencing my behaviors? You gather awareness of that, and then you work through a process. You can't just be aware. You've also then got to work through a process. People very often the plane will take off. They'll become aware, but then they don't work through the process. So then they get worse. They crash. So we've got to train ourselves in terms of all the things that the question of what is the main things, it's so different for everyone. And the easiest way to understand that is to think of a scale of 1 to 10, with 1, 2, and 3 being the day-to-day struggles that all of us face. There may be a bit irritation in traffic, or an irritating email, or irritation with a child or a sibling or a loved one or whatever, but they're not out of proportion. They're manageable. You resolve it pretty quickly. Then the middle of the road are your 4, 5, 6, 7. Those are habits that we've created. So maybe those irritations that we don't control, they grow into habits, and now they become that you slightly triggered and you lose your temper, and you've been doing it now for years. So you think, well, I'm just a temperamental person. That's not the case. You've actually, that temper is damaging you and the other people around you, and that's a bad habit, and that's short.
I love that you brought that one up, because I feel like we kind of like box ourselves into things with mental health, where like even with like, I could say like, I'm not a patient person with my kids, or like I'm an anxious person. And so anything that's like anxiety, and I used to say those things, but now that I've brought awareness around the triggers, it's like, oh, wait, I get to choose how I react to this thing. Exactly. And I get to decide how I want to show up and respond, versus it being just like this initial like quick thing that I'm going to. So I love that you brought that one up. Thank you for that.
That's absolutely, totally. I mean, that is key to this whole thing, is we have to self-regulate. Mind management is the crisis, not mental health. Mental health is a symptom of a bigger problem, and that's mind management. Yeah. So if we look at the scale of 1 to 10, if we don't manage the 1, 2s, and 3s, they become 4, 5, 6s, and 7s. We can have 1, 2s, and 3s being managed, and we can be developing 4, 5, 6s, and 7s, the social media habits, the eating habits, the temper habits, the just generally getting, like maybe just whatever things that we do that are disruptive to how we function. And the less we manage it, the bigger they grow. The more they grow, the more you think about them, the more they dominate, the more they interfere. But that 1 through 7 is stuff we do. Okay. Then you get your 8, 9s, and 10s. That's trauma. That's stuff that we don't do. It happens to us. That's the sexual abuse, the verbal abuse, the bullying, the war trauma, these racism, all those things that happen to us. COVID, isolation, those happen to us, and no one's exempt from those. They're different for everyone. Not everyone has sexual abuse, as we know, but the whole world experienced a pandemic, and the whole world experiences war, and the whole world is impacted by politics. And so there is every 5 years, more or less, people are going to experience some level of major trauma. And it's different for every person. But so that's less, the 8, 9s, and 10s, but most of us are living in the 1 to 7 at any one time. And if we don't manage those, even the little things, the constant irritations are wearing down your telomeres, are wearing down your endocrine system, are wearing down your cardiovascular system, are wearing down the brain networks, are wearing down the mind networks. And the more that network is wound down, chronic managed stress, like you mentioned earlier, with the stress, the weaker and more vulnerable you become. And the more your body feels wound down, the more that feeds back, and then mentally you feel worse. And then the messy mind just gets more and more messy. So we've got to train ourselves to catch that. So I'd say in general, it's a combination of all of those.
Right. For the different things for different people.
A different thing for different people. But I think one of the biggest things in our current day and age, which is I think is a common problem with any generation, is we need to manage our mind along with the changes. In previous generations, and I'm not doing a generational thing where previous generations were better than this generation. Yeah. There is something we did differently, though, that we're doing differently now. And on the positive side, we are much more aware of mental health. Our technological advances in medicine are fantastic, and we're talking more about that. Is fantastic. But what we are not doing now that we used to do is we are now, as soon as someone feels uncomfortable, it's being labeled and diagnosed, biomedical model reductionism, and people are trying to eliminate symptoms. Whereas in the past, it was description. So we need to describe, not diagnose. That's different about this generation. And what the research shows, mine plus others, is that if you just let symptoms happen and then, see your issues as symptoms that need to be suppressed. So see anxiety, depression, behavioral issues as symptoms that need to be suppressed, you're going to get worse. That's what the research shows.
One of the macro themes that you're talking about here is like, we don't really want to, whether it's our emotions or like anxiety, depression, whatever it is, like we don't really want to understand it. We want to just push it away, push it down, whether that's pushing it away with work, pushing it away with social media, pushing it away with a diagnosis. We just want to push it away and like make it go away, versus having a complete understanding, processing through it, getting to know it a little bit better, making friends with it, and moving forward in that capacity.
Oh, totally. That's the nail on the head. You've hit the nail on the head. Yeah. We've got to embrace, process, and reconceptualize. Because whatever's happened to you is not going away. Every experience that you ever have and ever will have is always part of your network. but you can change what it looks like in your network, and therefore you can change how it plays out into your future. That is the power we have, but that's not the power that of the message that is being spoken by the general psychiatric and medical community.
Yes.
And I know I train these people, and I've been in the field long enough to know what's been said is that you have these symptoms. Those are symptoms of a disease. We need to suppress those symptoms, and we need to, because they come from a chemical imbalance or something. And if you put the chemical back, they'll be fine. And that's not what's happening. Those drugs don't fix anything. They just maybe suppress. They suppress emotions for a time. They change psychoactively. They change the nature of the brain. So maybe it helps you cope better for a time if you're in a really bad place. But they're not a fix. They're not a solution.
You're not solving the root cause of the problem.
No, they're not. They're not insulin for diabetes, which is what they've often been compared to. That model is not helping. It's made things worse, and we see that research. There's evidence. It's been disproved that system doesn't work, but yet it's the dominant system. So this is why I do the work that I do. Is that we don't want to just you don't want to run from your stuff, because they never go away. They're just going to get bigger and bigger and explode in your life, and you're going to get worse. As painful as it is, you want to embrace. The minute you embrace and process, it's very hard, but you will get to the other side a much healthier person.
I really hope that you are enjoying this episode. I want to take a quick pause and invite you to come deeper with us if you're ready to explore the root cause connection to the symptoms that you're feeling. Whether you're bloated, exhausted, maybe you have brain fog, you can't lose weight. The WBK Health and Hormones course and our WBK membership and app are here to help you feel like you are empowered to take charge of your health and understand the real why behind you feeling how you do. And we give you the methods and protocols to heal with sustainable solutions. Right now, through Labor Day, get 10% off our annual membership on the WBK app with the code Balancing Chaos, all one word, BALANCINGCHAOS, and 20% off the Wellness by Kelly Health and Hormones course, and an emailed lab review with the code Balancing Chaos 20. That's BALANCINGCHAOS 20. These protocols in the course have meal suggestions, journal prompts, and supplement guides to help you heal whatever area of hormonal balance you're struggling with. With our membership, you'll receive a library of content and new workouts, recipes, and meditations every single week to keep you consistent and to allow your body to come back to its most vital state of being. Okay, now back to the episode.
I know that you have your app, and I want you to talk about that for a second. Is that the tool that you would recommend for anyone who's like, okay, I'm ready to try to I want to try to embrace my mind. I want to try to understand my mind. I want to try to bring awareness so that I can move forward into my future in a more empowered way. I'm such a big believer in, like, again, like you said, like seeing that future self, like looking at that person that you want to become and like using that as a tool to guide you versus making the things that have happened to you, like that's the way that you have to live forever. And like you're subject to your past. Like no one wants to live like that. That's not an empowering way to live. So talk to us a little bit about where do we find the solution and how do we start to embrace that idea of your future self?
I love how you describe that. The way that the way people there's a lot of move currently to sort of really focus on the past, which has good and good and bad. Good in that, yes, we need to see that the way we show up has a source and an origin, and it's important that we deconstruct that. But that's not what's happening. A lot of people are just looking and getting stuck. There's no deconstruction and reconstruction and reconceptualization happening. So yes, we need to, if we want to take the stories of our past and honor them, because you can't just, they've happened and they are alive, living. It's a network in your brain made of proteins and chemicals. It's a field in your mind that looks like an energy wave, and it's changes in your actual cells of your body that literally look like little proteins that are rolled up carpets in your body. So this conversation, for example, now is going via our mind. It's an energy wave. It's going into the brain as an energy wave. The brain responds and builds proteins into tree-like structures of our words, with a root, which is what we're saying, and then the branches would be how the listeners and viewers are interpreting. And then this information also goes into every cell of our body. We have 37 to 100 trillion cells as like little rolled up protein carpets. Now, this is healthy stuff we're talking about. So all of that's look healthy and produce a healthy outcome. But if someone's having a toxic experience in some sort or whatever, that's not going to be that thought tree, because it kind of looks like a tree in the brain, is going to be toxic looking and ugly, and the proteins are misfolded, so that creates an immune response in the brain and the body. In the cells, the little carpet things that I've been speaking about, instead of being rolled up, are unrolling. And in the mind, it's like a little bit of a tsunami versus a nice wave. And that combination constantly over time will create a sense of unease in us. And that's when people then will reach out to try and, maybe cover it with addiction, alcohol, or drugs, or sex, or porn, or overworking, or over-exercising, or under-eating, or overeating, or whatever, or anger, or and kind of not dealing with it. So that's not healthy.
I know for me, it showed up as, in the past, like eating disorder. It showed up as overworking. And so it's like the way that people are going to cope is going to be very different, but it all is like the way of the suppression. So I hear you on that.
Exactly. We need to learn to live with ourselves. We need to be able to sit with that pain, and we need to know how we're going to cope with it. Because what generally happens is people will recognize, I don't like feeling like this, and then
feel the discomfort,
and they start seeing stuff that why they like that, and then they don't want to be there. They want to change that. They can't sit with it, and that's when people reach to do other things like the overwork, the body image, whatever. And so I can relate to that as well. And we've got to learn to sit with ourselves. We've got to learn to be comfortable with ourselves. We've got to learn to embrace the mess. It's okay to be a mess. It's okay to mess up. It's okay to be jealous, envious, whatever, but what are you going to do about it? How are you going to live with it? What is your coping mechanism? And that's what I did over the years was to try and understand how an experience gets into the mind-brain-body network, how that shows up, what are the signals that it shows up as, and how can we recognize and self-regulate those signals to the point where we can go back inside that network and literally rebuild it, deconstruct and reconstruct it, and therefore remember how we were, but change how you play out into the future. And that process is what I've been researching and doing all these years. So I've simplified a very complex process.
Yes. Amazing. I feel like that's the solution. Is like, okay, now you're changing how you're responding to feeling uncomfortable. Instead of using a coping mechanism that isn't going to be helpful for you, it's actually probably going to be hurtful to you. We're going to find a coping mechanism that actually helps you deal with the issue and process through the emotion.
Exactly. That's exactly it. So you want to embrace, process, and reconceptualize. So it's not going anywhere. So and your brain is always changing. So if you don't deal with the stuff, it's just getting bigger and bigger. And whatever's in your network drives you. So we've got trillions of experiences in our networks, in the trees and these carpet things and these energy waves, and those are driving us. So if you don't like how you've been driven, if you don't like how you are in this moment, change that. If you don't like how you're showing up in as parent or work or whatever, you can change that. If there's elements you love, grow that. If there's elements you don't, and that's so I wanted to understand how to do that. So initially I work with people with traumatic brain injuries and dementias and severe learning disabilities and severe trauma, but I soon saw that this works for that, but it also works for just myself, just dealing with my own issues and dealing with what I've gone through. So in other words, it's pure mind management. So I developed a theory. You mentioned the theory early on, and from there I developed a system called the Neurocycle. It's currently called the Neurocycle. It had this whole fancy scientific name before. And it's essentially a system. It's basically like a system, almost like a formula of what happens between now and how this gets in your brain. So me opening my mouth and speaking words, what happens between you hearing my words and it landing up in your brain? And then how does that show up in your life, and how can you reverse engineer it? That's what the Neurocycle is helping you do. It's based on that science, and it's basically a very complex process, as you can imagine, but I've reduced it into 5 phases, and those with a preparation phase. And those phases it's not a new therapy technique. It's not something that is competing with something like cognitive behavior therapy. This
is like your 5-step program, right?
Yes, it's the Neurocycle. So it's called the Neurocycle, and it's a 5-step. It's basically it's not even a program. It's basically a system, and you can actually put any program into that system. So whatever you put in that system, it's basically clicking the mind, brain, body into alignment, so it makes it work. Because what we do is there's a lot of great stuff out there, like these great meditation techniques, and there's CBT and psychodynamics and ACT and that. There's great stuff out there, but if they aren't put into the system correctly, they become band-aids. You can say all the positive affirmations affirmations in the world that you want. You can do as many cognitive behavior therapy techniques as you want, trying to literally get rid of that thought, or make that thought go away, or make that thought become some other thought. But if you haven't resolved the actual issue, if you haven't processed through to find out why you are showing up like that and deconstructed, it's just a band-aid. It's not sustainable. You're going to slip back, and every time you slip back, you're going to have guilt, and you're going to get mad at yourself, and that sets up a whole cycle of negativity. So you asked earlier on, what is the best way for people to start doing learning about this?
Because I think that's what you said is so true. Like, a lot of people will not know where to start. They're like, oh, there's this app that teaches these meditations, and this person who's talking about future self, and I could go into my journal. It's like, okay, what do I
start? Okay, so all of those things that you like doing, like if you like journaling, you can still do it. If you like meditation, you can still do it. If you like using a meditation app, I've got meditations on my app as well. What I've done though is take all those meditation, breathing, and there's a ton of those meditation apps out there. Use them. They are called brain preparation. They are not going to fix the problem. They're going to make you feel better, but they could also make you feel worse. And that's what a lot of the research is showing, that as well, is that when you meditate, for example, and do breathing and that sort of thing, you are creating a general awareness, and that general awareness opens you up, and things come up. And if you don't know what to do with what's come up, you can actually feel worse. So very often, that's the one side. The other side of brain preparation, meditation, breathing, all those things, is if you do them alone, they can bring things up and make you feel worse, or they can get you stuck. You just don't progress. You just keep, every time it comes up, you band-aid, band-aid, band-aid. So, but if you use those to prepare your brain, and then you follow with the work of deconstructing or embracing, processing, and reconceptualizing, which involves deconstructing and reconstructing, then you're going to be able to be much more effective. So you've got to go beyond the mindfulness. You've got to go beyond the meditation. So the mindfulness and meditation, that's brain preparation. The neurocycle takes you beyond. So it's the active work that your mind-brain-body network craves in order for you to function. Now, we do this automatically every day. I've just made something that's an automatic process, conscious, and then you train yourself up consciously in the skill of doing it. So you increase your own conscious and unconscious intelligence, which is self-regulation, emotional intelligence, whatever you want to call it. It's basically that kind of concept. And essentially what it is that you want to become, from that general awareness that you create with brain preparation, mindfulness, and so on, you want to become more focused and specific. So the first step is to gather awareness. Now, gathering it in. So I'm aware, but now I'm going to gather specific awareness of what are my emotions. We're all good at doing that. But remember, emotions are not diseases. They're not illnesses. They're not bad. They're just they're just information, and they're telling you something. So the more curious you are about them, the more control you'll get over them. Emotions never live alone. Emotions always are connected to what's going on in your body, because as I said earlier on, everything that you experience goes in your mind, brain, and body. So that emotion, if you can say, I'm feeling frustrated, where are you feeling that in your body? Maybe tension in your shoulders. Then the next category of that, these two also never live alone. They work with behaviors. What are you saying and what are you doing? So frustration, tension in your shoulders, getting irritable and shouting or whatever, short-tempered. And then perspective is the fourth signal that we show up as, and that you want to gather awareness of. And that is how you're looking at life in that moment. Oh, everyone just irritates me. So, I mean, that's just a very quick example. But what we do is you tell yourself, it's okay to be a mess. You do a bit of breathing, whatever, brain preparation, and then you gather awareness. 4 little sentences. And that immediately, on a neuroscientific level, pulls, it's 4 signals. Imagine them like 4 balloons with 4 strings. And as you say them in this very structured, organized way, you're pulling a thought up into the conscious mind. So imagine these as 4 balloons attached to a tree, and a tree suddenly becoming visible, because thoughts look like trees in your brain. They look like rolled up carpets in your cells, and they look like waves in your mind. So, but it's easy to visualize the analogy of a tree. So these 4 signals. So these 4 signals are how we show up. Our networks show up as these 4 signals. So if we self-regulate by observing our signals, we can then say, okay, now I've gathered, prepared, now I've gathered. Now I'm going to say, okay, why do I have these? So next step down is now I've got to reflect. If you shine a white light through a prism, it comes out as a rainbow on the other side. That's what reflection is, focused reflection. It's depth. What does this prism of light, frustration, what else about it? When? How often? What's the detail? And you go through each of those. That's your next level down. And this is what your brain does. It packs this in. It starts with, when information goes in, it takes in those 4 signals, and then it starts breaking down and adding and adding and adding. So we build like this. Then the next thing you do is, it's important to capture this. So you capture this either through picturing, but the best way is to write, but not in a journal. Don't open a journal and start writing lines and sentences. You can keep a journal. I'm not saying don't do that, but that's actually step 5.
Yeah.
This is step 3. The step 3 is take a big piece of paper, maybe an art pad or something, date it in the middle, and then write all over the page. The more you pattern, it's called a metacogging. And I talk about it in the app. There's a video, in the books, everything. And you basically write all over the page. So whatever you've gathered awareness on and reflected in that very specific way, you can even draw 4 lines coming out the bubbles, and you could say emotions, behaviors, bodily sensations, perspective, and just whatever comes up. Whatever you've just gathered and reflected on, you'll be amazed what comes up. That pulls the 2 sides of the brain together, dives down deep, increases your insight, and starts pulling up things in the depths of your non-conscious mind that are associated with whatever that is. And it may be a ton of stuff. It may only be a little bit of stuff. But whatever, you're going to get insight.
I feel like for those of us women out there, it's like, I know for me, but before I had kids, or like right when I had kids, before I started doing a lot of this work on myself, I feel like, I would just get frustrated because I was like losing my patience, and I didn't have time, and I was overwhelmed. And so using that example of frustrated, like I would do exactly what we talked about in this episode and say like, okay, I'm going to go to the coping mechanism. I'm going to go to the glass of wine, or I'm going to go to scroll on social media. And I would never get more insight as to, why am I actually feeling frustrated? What is, like what you're saying, what is my reaction when I'm frustrated? How is that showing up for me? Like all of these things that are going to give us more of an understanding of ourselves, of what our triggers are, of how we could potentially solve the problem. So I love this process that you're talking about. So you said, so I know that was only step 3. I want you to cover the other 2 steps, but you can find this on the app, like of actually how to go through this.
Yeah. But it's literally like me giving you therapy. So I walk you through it. There's a 63-day neurocycle there. It's 60. So take you through it daily. You do the neurocycle, the 5 steps daily for 63 days. So it's literally, and there's mini lessons and stuff. So you learn a lot about the brain. And then there's little mini neurocycles, and there's decompression activities, which are basically brain preparation exercise. We've also just added another section on the app, and that's a parent add-on. So it's to parents to help children ages 2 through 10 through using neurocycles for tantrums, for fears, for not sleeping, for trauma, all that kind of stuff, which is also in this book over here. So the neurocycles.
Yeah, that's your new book, right? So I want you to talk about this because I know you have, I know you're a very busy woman. You've got lots going on, and I want you to talk about because I want our listeners to understand how I have 2 young kids. I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. And all I think about every single day is, how can I make it better for them so that they don't ever think like, this feeling is uncomfortable, I want to push it away. Like, and I know that you write about that in your book. So give us an overarching theme. I want everyone to go out and buy this book who has kids, because I think that it is so powerful in terms of like allowing our children to express themselves and understand themselves on a deeper level. But yes, please do give us some more insight on that.
Absolutely. Well, with your children, you want to give them the mental skills to be able to cope with what they're exposed to, because it's very overwhelming for them to process what's going on around them. So especially once they're out in the world, once they're like, your 1-year-old still more at home, but probably maybe going to a bit of daycare, but your 3-year-old's interacting now with others. And, so a good thing to remember with children is that they're not intentionally trying to be naughty. Children don't try to be naughty.
Yeah.
If a child is throwing a tantrum or doing something, it's actually a message that they're sharing. So they're experiencing something. It's building into the brain network, a mind-brain-body network, like I've described, and everything generates energy. So they've had an experience that they're exposed to that they don't understand how to process. That's like this bouncing energy. So they've got this going on in their mind, brain, and body. So they don't know how to process. So they may get in the back of your car when you collect them from daycare or something, and they kick the seat and throw a tantrum and yell, or maybe punch whatever, throw things, or just go quiet and withdraw or whatever. And that's not them trying to be difficult. And even though it's so frustrating as a parent, and you're trying to drive the car, and you're trying try and get through. It's very difficult to try and it happens in the shops and they throw a tantrum. It's very hard. But if we can shift our mindset and recognize that that's how they're showing up. Let's think about what they're doing. They're kicking the seat. That's a behavior. They're obviously frustrated. That's an emotion. Maybe they're rubbing their eyes. That's a bodily sensation. Perspective, they seem really upset. If you can just quickly run through in your mind and say those 4 things and then think, reflect, something must have happened today. Maybe someone hurt them, or maybe someone took their lunch, or maybe someone teased them, and then I know you may be driving the car, so you can't necessarily write it down because the 3rd step is to write down, but you could visualize and just think, and maybe just think of them in the playground, potential situations, think of maybe, has this happened before? Just, kind of try to picture the scenario that you're seeing at the moment. And then you could quickly ask yourself, okay, something's going on. I need to try and reconceptualize this. I need to try and get more information so that I can see if there's a pattern going on here. And you can ask yourself, has this happened every day this week? It's happened 3 times this week and happened twice last week. And it seems to always be something around Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Maybe there's a child that comes to daycare only on those days, and so they could child. So you start, that's the step 4. Step 5, okay, my action, I'm actually going to now talk to my child, and I'm going to do this, and I'll demonstrate it. And I'm also going to talk to the teacher tomorrow and say, look, I'm noticing this is going on. Now, I've just done a neurocycle. I went through all 5 steps: gather awareness, reflect, write, or visualize. If you're driving something, recheck, which is to look at what you've visualized or written down and say, this has happened. What can I do? What does it mean? What are the patterns, triggers? And then the active reach is an action. What can I do? Now that you cycle through that daily over 63 days when you're trying to break a pattern or deal with a trauma. If you're dealing with an in the moment thing, you can just go through it once or twice. So that's mind management. So now let's say you have so in this book, there's cartoon characters. So I explain how to do the neurocycle with the 3-year-old, the 5-year-old, the 7-year-old. There's little tables in here. I don't know if you've had a chance to look through the book, but there's a developmental table and breakdown. I'm just trying to find, here we go. There's a character called Brainy that I've created. I don't know if you can see it over there.
Yeah. I love that.
The concept of trees is the thoughts in my mind, and you can show a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. You can show them, look at that beautiful tree. That's what's in your brain when you have a birthday party, when you're happy, when you got your new puppy, and then you maybe see a tree without leaves on. You can say that's a sad thought in your brain. So you start teaching them that stuff goes in their brain as these physical things, and then you say, but we can make the happy trees, sad trees into happy trees, and this is how I'm going. And you sort of so I've got all that language. So these little gray blocks in here where I explain what you say to your child. There's developmental tables, the questions and statements you'd make with a child who's 3 versus 7.
Right.
And there's step by step how to break down and explain the 5 steps of the neurocycle. And then the last bit's all the things like signals of trauma, how to recognize trauma, what is trauma, a neurocycle for trauma, how to recognize sleep issues, how to recognize identity issues, social issues, and then break down into the different neurocycles. In the app, I have then actual neurocycles that match the book, that then and extra ones over and above that are in the book that you can walk through. But what we've also created is this little plush toy. So we've taken the Brainy character and made a toy, and it's a brain. So what we want to, there's a subtle messaging here. Kids love toys. They'll relate to it. It becomes your point of contact that you as a parent, we must give as much attention to our mind as we do to how we eat healthy and do exercise. So this is our little mind map, little Brainy. We call it Brainy. Brainy, when I'm sad or happy, Brainy's going to need to talk to you. They pick up Brainy. So you teach your child that, do you need to talk to me? You hand them Brainy. This is the talking stick. This is the talking tool. This is
it's like the thing that tells you it's safe to feel, it's safe to learn, it's safe to be in those emotions. I love what you said too about the idea and the concept of turning these sad trees into happy trees, because it's teaching them the concept of having a growth mindset versus having this fixed mindset of oh, this happened to you, not, oh, this is happening for you. You can learn from it. And one of the things that my son, he started going to school probably a month and a half ago now. And one of the things he's come home saying is oh, you didn't want to play with me, or his little brother didn't want to play with me. And I know he's picked that up at school, and it's maybe somebody said that to you, and that's okay. He also loves school. There's a bunch of really happy moments, but I'm trying to think of ways now that I can turn that into like a positive of like, okay, well, what, maybe if somebody said that to you, then like, what does that mean about like how they were feeling? And like, what can you learn from that experience? And so I love that you are teaching parents how to do that, because I think it's such a powerful thing for our kids to know how to do, rather than being like, I feel like so many of us, we just think that we're the victim and this is what our life is because it's happened to us.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you picked up on that growth mindset and you described that beautifully. And that's exactly what you're doing, because you show these actually little whole cartoon strip of how brainy can go in and get plant food. And so if he's very sad, like maybe what would you say with your son, if you find out why suddenly he's acting in that way, you maybe, as you go through the process, there's an image of brainy taking plant food and healing the root, because the root of the tree is the source of the story. So you explain to the child that the branches, this is what you're saying, and this is what you're doing, and this is what you're feeling, and this is how you're looking at life. And looking at life is a hard one, but you use sunglasses. I give all kinds of little techniques and tips, but you get 3 pairs of sunglasses, and one is broken, one is beautiful, one's kind of scratched, just cheap ones. And you have them in a box, and you say, are you feeling like this? And you can pick them up and you could put them on Brainy, or you could put them on your child, and it could be the broken ones or the scratched ones, that they sort of okay. Those kinds of things that you're teaching them to express and tell their story. So for example, if you take that of the whatever your son, the three-year-old who was, what did you say, he was battling a little bit with no one wants to play with me. So let's say it's in the car and he's like does this and gets a little pouty face and maybe doesn't want to talk to you and maybe throws his bag on the ground or something, and then you say to him, you pick up Brainy, you have Brainy in the car, and you say, oh, I see that Brainy's really upset, Brainy's kicking the chair, and Brainy's throwing his bag on the floor, and Brainy's this. So you make Brainy do it. I wonder why Brainy's so upset, and then you hand him Brainy, and he can start talking. So in other words, when they transfer to Brainy, it's them taking control and them saying Brainy's mad because that one said this and that one said that, and maybe you can have some other toys in the car, and they act out for you. They will start demonstrating what happened. And through various prompts, and I put the prompts in the book of the sorts of things you can do to prompt a child with kinds of questions at each age group, you can then find out what's going on. You can get through all 5 of those steps in a very simple way. And start getting to the root. Obviously, if a child's not writing yet, like your 1 and 3-year-old, you just draw pictures, paint a wall. If you can find a wall, if you've got a wall in your house, paint with chalk paint, and have a thing of chalk, have art supplies, paper, have the Brainy, have the book, like a designated area, nice little cushion or chair that they love, maybe some pretty whatever, some nice little snacks, and they go there and you take them and you pick them up, carry them, put them there and say, let's talk about this that happened. Can you draw it for me? So that your 3rd step, you're drawing it there. You could make a note. You can have a journal separately where you can just note, because if you see a pattern developing, at least you gather that data that you can speak to a teacher, speak to a therapist, or just basically track your child's changes, that kind of thing. But you providing this whole little cycle, and you work through the neurocycle with your child in that space. You can do it in a minute. You may only get through the first step in the day. That's fine. There's a whole chapter on timing. The point is that over time you teach them the process. Learn it for yourself first and demonstrate for yourself, and then do it with your child. So basically,
leads us into like we all are trying to be more conscious parents, right? Like that's what everybody says, more conscious parenting. And like, this is such a beautiful way to do that. And so I cannot wait for our listeners to go out and get the book. I'm super excited. And we'll make sure to link the app.
She got a little coloring book too. Yeah. So it's got different coloring.
It comes with so many fun things.
It's like you might just like show me which picture that they may not be able to read, but they can see Brainy sad, they can color it in, and you've got a blank page where you can then do more digging around to find out what's going on, but you're giving them the tools to tell their story.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing all of this today. I am so appreciative and grateful. And I think that all of it is such, one, it creates more awareness for the audience because they have a better understanding of like, oh, wait, like I have to fix my mind if I want anything else to go right. And 2, okay, now I have the awareness of how to do it. So I'm so grateful for you and for your time. Thank you so much. One quick question that we wrap up with is with every listener or with every guest we have on, we say, we know that you are living a super busy life. We know that you are, going all directions at once. You were just talking to me about how you're in a new studio, you're in a new city. How do you balance the chaos of trying to write books and be working and focus on family and do all of the things?
I've got 4 adult children. I just had our first grandchild as well, a couple of weeks ago.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And there's a lot, like everyone, I'm busy. I'm telling you, the key, it may sound so cheesy, but it's mind management. I have learned how to manage my mind in the situations that come up. And it's given me, I use the neurocycle. I love what I teach. I live and breathe what I teach. And I manage my mind. If I never ignore when I feel uneasy, I will deal with it. I will immediately work through a neurocycle. And that's what I wanted to say as well. If you've got young kids, go and sit in that space, go sit there, pick up Brainy and say, oh, I had such a bad day, I feel bad, this is how I feel, and you could demonstrate. So by you demonstrating how you managing your mental health, you're helping your child. My kids are all adults now, and they still see it. I mean, they know I'm neurocycling, they do it, they use it. So yeah, that for me is really, really key, is being able to manage my mind. And the neurocycle is the tool of mind management, and you can put, as I said, whatever you want into it. It's just the formula for how to make your brain work properly, basically. And can I say one more thing? These are available on our website. So the books are available on our website as well, drleaf.com. But my books are available wherever books are sold. This kit, and there's all kinds of specials if you get them all together. That's on our website, drleaf.com.
Beautiful. And that's where everyone can find you and the app and all of that stuff. We'll make sure to link everything in the show notes, but tell everybody your Instagram and anything else that where they can find you.
Absolutely. Well, my Instagram handle is Dr. Caroline Leaf, and the app is available on iTunes, Google Play. There's also a web version, and there's we just added a parent ad in now, and there's a special on that. My podcast is called Cleaning Up the Mental Mess, and there's also lots of other books. There's the adult book as well. That's for adolescents and adults. So that's drleaf.com is the webpage.
Thank you so much, Dr. Leaf, for being with us today. I so appreciate your time, and I'm looking forward to this episode coming out. I hope to speak with you again soon.
Thank you. Thanks so much. I loved our questions. Thank you.
I hope that you loved that episode and that you found some helpful tools and insights to help you heal and come back to the most vital version of yourself. If you did, please rate, review, and subscribe to our show. That's the best way to support us. You can follow me on Instagram at Wellness by Kelly and sign up now for the 7-day free trial of the WBK app and our health and hormones course through Labor Day. When you do, you'll get 20% off of the course and 10% off the annual membership. For the course, use the code BalancingChaos20, that's BALANCINGCHAOS20. And for the membership, use the code BalancingChaos, all one word. In our course, you'll get access to an emailed lab review, plus protocols that are built out to help you heal whatever hormonal imbalance you're struggling with. For our membership, you'll receive a library of content in our app with low-impact workouts, blood sugar balancing recipes, and mindfulness meditations, all designed to help you balance your hormones naturally and feel like your most beautiful, joyful, and vital self. Thanks so much for joining me. See you in the next episode.